ICE is reportedly targeting rideshare drivers and even travelers at O'Hare.
America, we need to talk about what just happened in O'Hare Airport in Chicago, because this story perfectly shows you how illegal immigration has been destroying opportunities for American workers and how it's finally changing. ICE just conducted sweeps at rideshare parking lots, and the reaction tells you everything you need to know about who's really driving your Uber and Lyft.
Federal agents conducted a sweep at a parking lot today for rideshare drivers. The parking lot is just steps from O'Hare Airport.
What is up, guys? Tyson Dela Cruz here. Thank you so much for rocking with me. This story is about more than just immigration enforcement. It's about restoring fair competition to American workers who've been getting undercut for years by people who had no legal right to be working here in the first place. Let me break down what happened in O'Hare Alpha Lot, that's designated parking area for rideshare drivers. Federal agents showed up twice a day with unmarked white minivans, and they weren't playing games.
Here's what they were asking of drivers. Are you a U.S. citizen, and do you have proof? And one of the agents even came up to me, asked me the same question.
Two simple questions. Are you a U.S. citizen? Do you have proof? If you couldn't answer yes to both with documentation, you're getting handcuffed and you're getting taken away. That's it. That's how simple immigration enforcement should be. But here's what really tells you the scope of this problem. This parking lot normally has several hundred rideshare vehicles parked there. After ICE raids, about 50 to 60 cars. That's it.
Take a look at this parking lot. It's about 50, 60 cars here, but I am told it is usually packed with several hundred rideshare vehicles, but not today.
Think about that math for a second. You went from hundreds of drivers to dozens. Where did all those other drivers go? They weren't American citizens. That's where they went. They scattered like roaches when the lights came on because they knew that they had no legal right to be working here. That tells you everything you need to know about the scale of illegal employment in the rideshare industry. We're not talking about a few isolated cases. We're talking about the majority of drivers in one of America's busiest airports being people who shouldn't have been working here legally. Now, here's the beautiful part of this story. The drivers who stayed, they are legal. They are American citizens. They are people who have every right to be working these jobs.
The rideshare drivers here at the airport, they have their phones ready to go. They've been shooting all kinds of video and pictures. When ICE was spotted here, detaining people.
And you know what these legal drivers are doing now? They're talking about getting more rideshare requests, more calls, more money, better rates, because the people who were driving down wages by working illegally are gone. This is basic economics. When you have people willing to work for below market rates because they're desperate and need to stay under the radar, what happens to wages for everyone else? They crash. Legal drivers couldn't compete because illegal drivers were willing to work for scraps. But now that unfair competition has been eliminated, American workers can finally charge what their services are actually worth. They can demand proper working conditions. They can report safety violations without fear. They can operate legitimate businesses instead of competing against people who were cutting every corner because they weren't supposed to be here.
The drivers formed a text chain so they could alert other drivers to the presence of ICE. In fact, just a few minutes ago, they reported a white van that was just in this parking lot because it looked like one of the vans that ICE was using.
Look at this. They had organized text chains to warn each other about ICE presence. This wasn't casual illegal employment. This was an organized system of people who knew that they were breaking the law, and they were actively helping each other avoid consequences. They were sharing pictures and videos of federal agents, creating early warning signs, coordinating their illegal activities. This was sophisticated organization to circumvent American immigration and law enforcement. Now, here's where it gets really rich. The union representing rideshare drivers put out a statement crying about due process rights being violated and calling this a tax on immigrant families. Hold on a minute. These people were working here illegally. They were undercutting American workers. They were operating without proper documentation, without legal work authorization, probably without proper insurance or background checks. But somehow ICE enforcing immigration law is a problem.
We are deeply concerned that the drivers' due process rights were violated at O'Hare today. This is part of a broader pattern of attacks on immigrant families by an administration that continues to weaponize fear and division instead of investing in solutions in our communities.
Let me explain something to you guys about due process. If you're in the country illegally and you're working without proper authorization, there's your due process. You broke the law. The process is you get deported. You don't get to steal jobs from American citizens, then cry about your rights when you get caught. That's not how this works. That's not how any of this works. And notice how they frame it. Attacks on immigrant families. No, this is enforcement of immigration law against people who chose to break the law. Legal immigrants who follow the rules aren't being attacked. American citizens aren't being attacked. Only people who are working illegally are affected. The union should be celebrating this. Their legal members just saw their competition eliminated and their earning potential increased dramatically. But instead, they're defending people who are undercutting their own members' wages. Let's talk about something that nobody wants to discuss: the security implications of having hundreds of unauthorized workers operating in one of America's busiest airports.
Witnesses tell us that federal agents came here twice, once in the morning and again in the afternoon. In both instances, multiple people were detained.
When you get into an Uber or a Lyft at O'Hare, you don't know if the driver is legally authorized to work. You don't know if they've passed proper background checks. You don't know if they have legitimate insurance. You don't even know if they're even who they claim to be. When people are working illegally, all those safety measures go out the window. They can't go through proper vetting process because they're not supposed to be here. They can't get legitimate insurance because they don't have legal status. They can't report crimes or cooperate with law enforcement because they're afraid of being discovered. This creates a massive security vulnerability at one of our most important transportation hubs. Thousands of travelers every day who get into vehicles driven by people who had no legal right to be working, who couldn't be properly vetted, and who were operating outside the normal safety and security protocols.
This Uber driver from Guatemala, who did not want his face shown on camera, says he was eating lunch when agents asked him if he was a U.S. citizen.
And notice this driver from Guatemala didn't want his face to be shown on camera. Why? Because he knew he was breaking the law. He knew he shouldn't have been working here. He knew that if his identity was revealed, there would be major consequences. That is not the kind of person you want driving passengers at major airports. You want drivers who are proud to show their faces, who have nothing to hide, who are operating legitimate businesses with proper authorization. What really gets me is how organized this illegal operation was. These weren't just individuals making bad choices. This was a coordinated system to circumvent American law.
Rideshare drivers are sharing these pictures and video of federal agents approaching drivers while they're stopping to eat a meal or while they're out of their cars praying.
They're sharing pictures and videos of federal agents creating intelligence networks to help each other avoid law enforcement. They're portraying themselves as victims. They were just trying to eat, or they were just praying. The reality is they were working here illegally and got caught. And look how they're trying to manipulate public sympathy. They're not just saying we were working without authorization. They're saying we were eating. We were just praying when ICE showed up. They're trying to make it sound like ICE was targeting people for their religion or their basic human needs, when really ICE was targeting people for working illegally.
The drivers are now donating money directly to the spouses and families of those drivers who they say were taken away from this parking lot.
Now they're organizing financial support for families of people who were deported for working illegally. Again, this shows how organized and coordinated this illegal operation was. They have support networks, financial systems, communication channels, everything you'd expect from an organized criminal enterprise. Because that's what it is. Organized crime. When you systematically circumvent immigration and employment law, you create networks to avoid law enforcement. When you undercut legal workers through their illegal means, that's organized criminal activity. This enforcement action at O'Hare is just one example of what's happening across the entire American economy. For decades, illegal workers have been undercutting American wages in industry after industry: construction, landscaping, food services, delivery, and now rideshare driving. When you eliminate unfair competition, what happens? Wages go up, working conditions improve. American workers can actually make a living wage again. Legal immigrants who followed the rules can compete on a level playing field. The people who are working here illegally weren't just hurting themselves, they were hurting every legitimate worker in the industry by driving down standards across the board. They were willing to work for less money in worse conditions with no benefits, no protection, no resources if they get mistreated. That creates a race to the bottom that hurts everyone except for the employers who are exploiting illegal labor. Now that this unfair competition is being eliminated, the market can work the way it's supposed to work. Legal drivers can charge fair prices. They can demand safe working conditions. They can build legitimate businesses instead of operating in the shadows. They can contribute to the tax base instead of working off the books. This is what happens when immigration law is actually enforced. This is what happens when American workers are protected from unfair competition. This is what happens when the system works the way it's supposed to work. The message from this enforcement is crystal clear. If you want to work in America, do it legally. If you want to drive for rideshare companies, get proper authorization. If you want to compete in American markets, follow American rules.
Many flights arriving at O'Hare this week, carrying people coming for Sunday's Chicago Marathon.
This year it feels different.
And you know what? It should feel different. For far too long, we've had a system where people could break our immigration law, work illegally, undercut American workers, and face no consequences. That era is over. American workers deserve fair competition, not to be undercut by people who are willing to work for nothing because they're desperate to avoid detection. Legal immigrants deserve to compete on a level playing field, not to be disadvantaged because they followed the rules. Legal drivers who remained after O'Hare after the raids are about to have a much better year, not because of government handouts, but because illegal competition has been eliminated, not because of special programs, but because the law is finally being enforced. This is how the free market is supposed to work, with fair competition between people who have the legal right to participate in it. America, this is what real immigration enforcement looks like. After years of looking the other way while illegal workers undercut American wages, we finally have an administration that's serious about enforcing our laws and protecting American workers. The scenes from O'Hare, according to legacy media, might be dramatic, but it's absolutely necessary. Every person who was arrested had the opportunity to work here legally. They chose not to. They chose to break our immigration laws, undercut American workers, and operate outside the system. Now they're facing the consequences of those actions, and American workers are finally getting the fair competition that they deserve. The people crying about due process and immigrant raids don't want to talk about the rights of American workers who've been getting squeezed out of their own economy for decades. They don't want to talk about legal immigrants who followed the rules and are now competing against people who broke the law. Well, that's changing, and the empty parking lot at O'Hare is proof that when you enforce the law, American workers win. This isn't about being anti-immigrant. It's about being pro-law and pro-American worker. Legal immigrants who follow the rules benefit from this enforcement just as much as American citizens. The bottom line is this: fair competition benefits for everyone, except for the people who were cheating the system, and it's about time the cheating stopped. Let me know what you think about this. Drop it down in the comment section down below. Smash the like button if you kindly would. Share, subscribe, and as always, guys, I'll catch you on the next one.